A consultancy recommended that a large construction company should encrypt its wireless network. Currently, the network is set to open and allows any device to connect to it, even employees' personal devices. What encryption product would help the company secure its wireless networks? Wi-Fi protection access. Wi-Fi protected access, particularly Wi-Fi protected access 3, secures the traffic sent over a wireless network. Based on this scenario, the company needs to encrypt its wireless traffic. A security consultant is working with a client to improve security practices. How can the consultant best describe the cryptographic hashing process? Hashing produces a fixed length string of bits from an input plain text that can be of any length. What best describes text that is not encrypted? Plain text. Plain text refers to data that is not encrypted. An attacker can easily intercept data that is in a plain text form. A small development company just set up a web server and must ensure a secure customer connection. Regarding digital certificates, what is a file containing the information that the subject wants to use in the certificate, including its public key? A CSR. The certificate signing request is a file containing the information that the subject wants to use in the certificate, including its public key. A security engineer noticed a high volume of images sent from the company networks to a popular gaming social media platform. After reviewing the images, the security engineer saw that the images were seemingly benign. Why might these images still be a threat? They may contain steganography. Steganography embeds information within an unexpected source, such as a message hidden in a picture. Cover text describes the container, document, or file that it resides in. Steganography. A chief executive pushed back against the Information Technology Department's proposal to set up disk encryption on all devices. What best describes why the CEO should approve the proposal instead of pushing back against it? Disk encryption protects stolen devices from data theft. Disk encryption protects against data loss when a malicious actor steals a device. The data remains safe as long as the malicious actor does not have the keys. An indie game developer created a browser based on the Chromium project. The developer must ensure that anyone using the browser is safe from invalid certificates. What should the developer use to ensure that the browser blocks revoked certificates? CRL. A certificate authority or owner can revoke and suspend a certificate for any reasons. A certificate revocation list, CRL, is the list of no longer valid certificates. A large certificate issuing company lost its reputation due to poor business practices. Its higher signing authority revoked the ability to issue new certificates. A borrower now show it is invalid. What describes the position that the company once had but has now lost? A root certificate authority. C. Certificate authority. A certificate authority is a server that guarantees subject identities by issuing signed digital certificate wrappers for their public keys. A cancer diagnostic clinic must transfer a large amount of data to a cloud vendor to migrate from its own premises server. However, the amount of data would make the transfer over the internet take extensive time due to the limited bandwidth the clinic's internet provides. Instead, it wants to ship an encrypted copy of the data to the vendor. What type of encryption would best fit the clinic's needs? Symmetric algorithm. In this scenario, the best option is to use a symmetric algorithm as it uses the same secret key to perform encryption and decryption and allows for efficiency, security, and speed. What is the process used to encrypt and decrypt a message? Algorithm. An algorithm refers to the operations that transform plain text into ciphertext with cryptographic properties, also called a cipher. There are symmetric, asymmetric, and hash cipher types of algorithms. After deploying a mobile device management system to all its computers, a computer noticed a small subset failed to encrypt their hard drives. After inspection, those devices do not have the correct component required for the drive encryption to function. Which security component would the company need to install for the drive encryption to work? TPM, a trusted platform module chip, holds the cryptographic secrets and hardware state to help secure an encrypted hard drive. Trusted platform module. A recent security flaw allowed a malicious actor to access sensitive data even though the data never left the server and there is full drive encryption. Which data state did the malicious actor most likely compromise? At rest. In use. Data in use or data in processing refers to the state in which data is present in volatile memory, such as a system random access memory or a central processing unit, registers, and cache. The security flaw allows for data exploitation while in use. A small enterprise needs a key exchange method to ensure perfect forward secrecy. It needs something that can help future-proof its security while it grows. Which key exchange method would meet the needs of the enterprise? A Diffie-Hellman. Perfect forward secrecy, PFS, mitigates the risk from a basic key exchange. PFS uses Diffie-Hellman DH key agreement to create ephemeral session keys without using the server's private key. Diffie-Hellman. A security engineer investigates the impacts of a recent breach in which a threat actor was able to exfiltrate company data. What cryptographic solution serves as a countermeasure that mitigates the impact of hash table attacks by adding a random value to each plain text input? SALT. A SALT is a security countermeasure that mitigates the impact of pre-computed hash table attacks by adding a random value to each plain text input. Sprinkle some salt on it. A small company needs to ensure it protects the SQL data against theft while in use. What type of encryption would best fit its needs? Database level encryption. Database or page level encryption and decryption occur when data transfers between disk and memory. Database level encryption would be the best option for the small company to protect this structured query language. A news reporter received an anonymous message containing a potentially Pulitzer Prize winning story. However, the anonymous sender requested the report set up a communication system that enforced encryption before sending over details for the story? What is the anonymous sender trying to secure? D. Encryption allows for confidentiality. The purpose of encryption is to allow for confidentiality. It prevents third parties from listening in and knowing what communication is occurring. Encryption is important for things like whistleblower reporting. A coffee chain hired a marketing firm to set up a website that allows signups. However, after running a test on the website, an error message in the browser stated that the connection was insecure. What framework should the marketing firm use to ensure this error message does not show up? Public key infrastructure. Public key infrastructure, PKI, refers to framework of certificate authorities, digital certificates, software, services, and other cryptographic components deployed to validate subject identities. A certificate authority had its issuing authority revoked and its certificates expired. How might those certificates still appear valid, even though they should be on a certificate revocation list? The CRL still requires updating. Okay. When an entity revokes a certificate, they add it to a certificate revocation list. However, it requires a browser to check the list and for the certificate authority to provide the list. If this does not happen, an invalid certificate may still work. Why might a company want a longer key length? To decrease the chances of the ciphertext cracking. Increasing the key length will improve the algorithm security by decreasing the chance of cracking the ciphertext. Furthermore, adding salting and hashing will generally reduce the chances of malicious actors gaining access to the data. A coffee chain hired a marketing firm to set up a website that allows signups. However, after testing the website, an error message in the browser stated that the connection was insecure. What should the marketing firm purchase and set up so the page shows that it is secure? A digital certificate. A digital certificate is a wrapper for a subject's public key. It contains information about the subject and the certificate's issuer. The certificate is digitally signed to prove it came from a particular certificate authority. A sole proprietorship construction company contacted an information technology consultant for technical support for a computer issue. After resolving that issue, the consultant suggested the construction company enable computer encryption. Why might the company want to enable encryption on its computer's hard drive? To prevent unauthorized access to data on a stolen device. Enabling hard drive encryption is a basic step to prevent data loss in the event of a stolen device. Without it, anyone can easily access the stolen device regardless of needing a password. A company is migrating its shared drives to a cloud repository service. While the majority of its drives use job titles for automated access, it has a few one-off project drives that it wants a specific owner to choose who has access to them. Which control type would fit these one-off drives? Discretionary access control. The resource owner has primacy in a discretionary access control model. Every resource has an owner who creates a file or service, although another user can receive ownership assignment. A contractor only works for a company from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. What kind of restriction could the company set up on a contractor's account to prevent using it outside that range? Time-based restrictions. A time-based restriction will prevent access to corporate resources outside a set schedule. The company should set this account policy. A recently hired information technology manager wants to implement more automation regarding the onboarding process. What process describes setting up accounts to a new employee can automatically access the software and file shares from the human resource platform? Multi-factor authentication. It's provisioning. Provisioning is the process of setting up a service according to a standard procedure or best practice checklist. Linking multiple systems together can increase the automation of onboarding procedures. One of the company's accounts submitted a ticket stating they could not access a particular section of the accounting software. Why might the accountant not have access to every part of the accounting software? Least privilege. To increase the security posture of any given system, users should only have the necessary access, least privilege, to complete their work and nothing more. A manufacturing company recently bought out another similar company. They need to link each company's directory systems together to access their resources without merging the two. How can they link the two directory systems together? Federation. Federation directories allow two different subsets of accounts to work together for permissions and access. Okay. A company wants to set up sign on without passing credentials through each piece of the software and cloud service. Which protocol would meet this requirement? Open authorization. The Open Authorization Protocol is a system that facilitates the sharing of information within a user profile between sites. Open authorization can be used to implement SSO by allowing users to log in once and access multiple applications without passing credentials through to each piece of software. Open authentication can be integrated with other mechanisms to provide single sign-on operation capabilities, and also supports OpenID Connect tokens to enhance identity verification when needed. Why might it be a bad policy to set up permissions individually instead of using an access control methodology? Yeah, it's hard to manage. Setting each permission individually may be an easier option if a file share is small. However, as file shares grow, maintaining this style of permissions can increase complexity. An engineer for an information technology department needs to develop a metrics dashboard by pulling data from the ticketing system. What technology would the engineer need from the ticketing system to complete this project? Application Programming Interface. An Application Programming Interface (API) is a scripting method to expose a service, allowing other scripts or programs to use it. For example, an API enables software developers to access transmission control protocol, internet protocol, network stack functions under a particular operating system. Which technology replaced NT LAN Manager in Active Directory? Kerberos. The preferred system for network authentication in a Windows environment is Kerberos, which replaces the legacy system, NT LAN Manager authentication. A small defense contractor is setting up a new shared drive system and needs the proper controls to ensure that only those with the correct classification can access any given folder or file. Which control type would meet these requirements? Mandatory access control. Security clearance levels form the basis of mandatory access control. Rather than defining access control lists on resources, each object receives a classification label. Depending on the clearance level, a subject receives access to that resource. A network administrator is cleaning up the company's shared drive resources. Through an audit, the administrator discovered that the company did not properly manage the permissions over the years. Which control type should the administrator change the permissions to that gives access determined by the job? Role-based access control. Role-based access control means an organization defines its permission requirements in terms of the task that an employee or service must be able to perform. Each set of permissions is a role. While developing a new security policy, the network administrator suggests to the chief information officer that the company remove the password age portion. Why has having a password age policy caused issues for companies? B and D. Employees choose weak passwords when they need to change them frequently, and employees leave passwords readily accessible in their work area. With the number of passwords people must remember and the various complexity requirements, people typically choose passwords that threat actors can easily crack and unfortunately reuse them across multiple services. During a recent audit, a company noticed a troubling trend where people had their passwords on sticky notes in their work area. The employees stated that the password policy made it too difficult to remember them. Which policy should the company change to alleviate this issue? Password complexity. Modifying the password complexity policy to allow for longer but easily remembered passwords can aid in lowering the number of people saving their passwords insecurely. An engineering firm wants people to implement an authentication design that uses a framework for passwordless authentication. What statement is not accurate regarding passwordless authentication? The relying party uses a private key to verify the signature and authenticate the account session. To the contrary, part of the passwordless authentication framework involves the relying party to use the public key, not private, to verify the signature and authenticate the account session. A company using Windows Server technology needs to link its Active Directory to a third-party service to allow single sign-on. Which service that uses the standard X500 would work for the company? Virtual Private Network, Lightweight Directory Access Control, Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. Lightweight Directory Access Protocol is a protocol companies use for accessing network directory databases. LDAP stores information about authorized users, their privileges, and other organizational information. Lightweight Directory Access Protocol. A company needs to improve its security posture regarding credentials. Which security policy changes would implement the National Institute of Standards and Technology, NIST, updated guidelines? Multi-factor authentication. Multi-factor authentication has taken place as the recommendation for NIST, coupled with decreasing complexity and age requirements. Additionally, it adds another layer to prevent malicious actors from gaining access. A chief information officer tasked the network administrator with redeveloping a credential policy for the company. While working on the new policy, the chief executive officer asked why having more than one factor to log into the computers was important. Why is just having a password not enough in today's world? Employees choose poor passwords. With the number of passwords people must remember and the various complexity requirements, people typically choose passwords that threat actors can easily crack and unfortunately reuse them across multiple services. An employee traveling in Europe for vacation submitted a ticket as they could not access their work email. Which policy does the company use? Location-based authentication. Location-based access policies would need a temporary exemption option to allow for travel. Location-based access policies prevent access to company systems outside a specific area, typically the company's state. An employee travels out of the country for work but still needs access to the company's shared drive. What would the information technology department need to set up on that employee's computer to connect to the shared drive outside of the office? A virtual private network. Setting up a VPN allows individuals to access corporate resources outside the corporate infrastructure. Without a VPN, employees cannot access a file share if they are not at their office. A real estate investment firm wants to implement single sign-on for its dozens of services and software. The firm found a vendor to implement that request using the Extendable Markup Language (XML) standard. What solution does this vendor use for SSO? SAML, Security Assertion Markup Language, allows for federating a network or cloud system. SAML assertions and claims between the principal, the relying party, and the identity provider use extensible markup language as their structure. A chief information security officer wants to enhance the identity and access management security procedures in the company by adding an extra layer on top of the existing procedures. Which of the following would help achieve this objective by requiring verification through multiple methods or by tying authentication to a geographic area? Enforce multi-factor authentication and enable location-based authentication. Adding multi-factor authentication, MFA, would have a greater impact on the company's security posture. The CISO needs to consider what method the MFA is the most secure.